Anna, an 18-year-old girl, had always carried a quiet question in her heart. Growing up in the bustling neighborhoods of New York with her adoptive parents, she experienced love and warmth. Yet, there was a part of her that yearned for answers about where she came from and who her biological parents were. Every family photo on the mantle was a reminder of her life with her adoptive family, but in her quieter moments, Anna would wonder about the faces she had never seen, the voices she had never heard. What were they like? Did she share their eyes, their smile, their laugh? These questions lingered, growing louder as she approached adulthood. By the summer of 2016, her curiosity could no longer be contained. With determination, Anna began to piece together the fragments of her past. Adoption records, once a sealed chapter of her life, became the key to unlocking her origin story. After weeks of searching, she discovered their names, Peter and Sarah. They lived in Henrico, Virginia, hundreds of miles away but suddenly closer than ever. Anna hesitated before reaching out. What if they didn't want to see her? What if her presence disrupted their lives? Despite these fears, hope won over doubt. She sent the first letter, carefully handwritten, pouring her heart into every word. Days turned into weeks before a response arrived, but when it did, it brought with it an overwhelming wave of emotion. Peter and Sarah's reply was warm, even enthusiastic. They had thought about Anna often, wondering where life had taken her. For them, her letter was a chance to reconnect and perhaps heal the wounds left by their decision years ago. The reunion was set in motion. When Anna arrived in Henrico, she was greeted with hugs that felt surprisingly familiar for people she had never met before. Peter, an illustrator with kind but tired eyes, seemed overwhelmed by her presence. Sarah, a homemaker with a gentle demeanor, held Anna's hand as if afraid to let her go again. Anna was introduced to her younger half-siblings, who looked at her with curiosity and excitement. For Anna, this was the beginning of a new chapter. She quickly adapted to her biological family's routines. Peter often sat at his desk, sketching late into the night, while Sarah busied herself with household tasks, humming softly under her breath. Evenings were spent sharing stories, filling in the years they had missed. At first, everything seemed perfect. Anna felt a deep sense of belonging she had never known before. Her relationship with Peter was particularly strong. They bonded over shared interests: art, books, and a mutual love for quiet moments. Peter would often show Anna his sketches, and she would marvel at the way his hands brought images to life. But beneath the surface of this seemingly heartwarming reunion, there were subtle tensions. Sarah sometimes seemed uneasy, her smiles faltering during conversations between Peter and Anna. The younger children, while excited to have a new sibling, occasionally showed signs of confusion about where Anna fit into their family dynamic. Little moments began to add up. Late-night conversations between Anna and Peter became more frequent, lasting well after Sarah and the children had gone to bed. Their bond, once innocent, started to take on a tone that Sarah couldn't ignore. She brushed off her concerns at first, attributing them to her own insecurities. As the weeks turned into months, Anna's life in Henrico became more deeply intertwined with her biological family. Yet, the atmosphere in the house grew heavier. Sarah's unease grew more pronounced, and she began spending more time away from home. The warmth that had greeted Anna's arrival started to feel like a fading memory, replaced by something harder to define, something that felt wrong. Anna, however, remained unaware of the storm brewing around her. For her, this was still a dream come true. She had found her family, and she was determined to make up for lost time. She was blissfully unaware that the story she thought would end in healing was on the verge of taking a dark and unexpected turn. This chapter of Anna's life began with so much hope and excitement. The summer of 2016 marked a turning point for her, a moment when the past and present collided. But as the days passed, the once clear path forward became tangled in emotions, secrets, and dynamics that no one was prepared for. Little did Anna know, the reunion she had long dreamed of was the first step into a story far more complicated, and far more tragic, than she could have ever imagined. What started as a joyful reunion between a father and daughter quickly took an unsettling turn, one that left an indelible mark on everyone involved. At first, Anna and Peter's closeness seemed understandable. They were making up for lost time, forging a bond that they had missed during Anna's childhood. But as the weeks passed, their connection began to draw attention in ways that were harder to explain or justify. Sarah, always observant, was the first to notice the subtle changes. The way Peter's demeanor brightened when Anna entered the room, the long conversations between them that often ended abruptly when Sarah joined them, and the private laughter they shared over inside jokes, all of it felt unusual. At first, Sarah told herself she was overthinking things. After all, wasn't it normal for a father and daughter to grow close after such a long separation? Yet the unease gnawed at her. It wasn't just the closeness, it was something unspoken, a tension that seemed to grow with each passing day. Sarah began to notice moments that set off quiet alarms in her mind. Peter's gaze lingered on Anna longer than it should have during dinner conversations. When Anna laughed, Peter's expression softened in a way that didn't feel entirely paternal. The growing connection between them wasn't just emotional, it was as though an invisible boundary was slowly being crossed, one small step at a time. By late 2016, the signs became harder to ignore. Sarah began to feel like an outsider in her own home, a spectator to a relationship that excluded her. She noticed Peter and Anna often retreating to the study, where they claimed to be discussing art and shared interests. Yet the laughter that echoed from behind the closed door didn't sound like the kind of conversation Sarah expected between a father and daughter. She started avoiding the study altogether, unwilling to face the reality that was beginning to take shape. It wasn't just Sarah who noticed. Friends who visited the family commented on the unusual dynamic between Peter and Anna. One close friend pulled Sarah aside after a dinner party, expressing concerns about how Peter and Anna interacted. "It's almost like they're in their own world," the friend said cautiously. Sarah brushed off the comment at the time, but it stayed with her, a seed of doubt that began to grow into something much larger. Unable to shake her suspicions, Sarah decided to confront Peter directly. The night was tense, the air in their living room thick with unspoken words. Sarah didn't mince her words. "What is going on between you and Anna?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Peter, caught off guard, tried to deflect, but Sarah pressed on, her patience worn thin by months of silent observations and growing doubts. What Peter admitted that night shattered Sarah's world. Their relationship had crossed boundaries, emotional ones at first, but now physical. The betrayal cut deeper than Sarah thought possible. She wasn't just losing her husband, she was grappling with the realization that the family she had built was crumbling around her. With tears streaming down her face, Sarah packed her belongings and took the younger children with her, leaving the house that no longer felt like home. For Peter and Anna, however, Sarah's departure was seen as an obstacle removed. In their minds, the connection they shared was undeniable, something that transcended societal norms and the expectations of those around them. They began to envision a future together, one where their bond would no longer need to be hidden. In July 2017, Peter and Anna relocated to Knightdale, North Carolina. The small town, with its quiet streets and close-knit community, offered a fresh start. They moved into a modest home on the outskirts of town, far from the prying eyes of their former friends and neighbors. Here, they could build a life together, free from judgment, or so they thought. The move didn't go unnoticed. Family members and friends were shocked by the decision, struggling to comprehend how such a relationship could develop. While some chose to cut ties entirely, others tried to intervene, sending letters and making phone calls to persuade Peter and Anna to reconsider their choices. But their pleas fell on deaf ears. Peter and Anna were resolute in their decision, believing that they were simply misunderstood. As the months passed, their new life in Knightdale settled into a rhythm. Peter resumed his work as an illustrator, spending long hours in his home studio. Anna, now 19, focused on setting up their new home, decorating the small space with second-hand furniture and personal touches that reflected their shared tastes. On the surface, it seemed like they had managed to carve out a semblance of normalcy. Then came the news that complicated their situation further: Anna was pregnant. The discovery brought a mixture of emotions: excitement, anxiety, and an unspoken acknowledgement of the challenges ahead. For Peter, the pregnancy was a symbol of their commitment, a tangible representation of the life they were building together. For Anna, it was both thrilling and daunting, a responsibility she wasn't entirely prepared for but welcomed nonetheless. Their announcement sent shockwaves through the few remaining connections they had with family and friends. Even those who had tried to support them found it increasingly difficult to reconcile the situation. Whispers spread through their old community, fueling rumors and speculation. Meanwhile, in Knightdale, the couple did their best to keep to themselves, avoiding unnecessary interactions with neighbors who might ask too many questions. As the pregnancy progressed, the weight of their decisions began to show. Peter became increasingly protective of Anna, wary of anyone who might threaten the life they were trying to create. He withdrew further into himself, his once vibrant illustrations taking on darker, more abstract themes. Anna, meanwhile, struggled with feelings of isolation, missing the friendships and support she had left behind in New York. The bond that had once felt unbreakable began to show cracks. Late-night arguments, fueled by stress and exhaustion, became more frequent. Yet, despite the challenges, Peter and Anna remained committed to their unconventional path, convinced that they could weather any storm together. Little did they know, the greatest storm was yet to come. Their story, already steeped in controversy, was on the brink of taking a turn that no one could have foreseen, a turn that would leave a trail of devastation in its wake. In the late summer of 2017, Anna welcomed her son, Jack, into the world. The birth brought a mix of joy and apprehension. For Anna, holding her baby for the first time was an indescribable moment, one that felt pure and untainted by the outside world. Jack's tiny hands gripping her fingers seemed to hold the promise of a future she had dreamed of, but deep down, she knew their situation was anything but ordinary. Peter, now a father again, was equally captivated by Jack. He spent hours by the crib, sketching portraits of his newborn son, his pencil strokes capturing every delicate feature. The house was filled with the sounds of Jack's cries, the hum of lullabies, and the quiet conversations of two people trying to navigate a life that defied convention. But their unconventional family life couldn't remain hidden forever. Despite their efforts to live a quiet and private existence in Knightdale, whispers about their relationship began to surface. Whether it was a neighbor noticing something odd or an acquaintance from their past deciding to intervene, the secrecy that had shielded them for so long started to unravel. In early January 2018, an anonymous tip reached the local authorities. The details of the tip were specific enough to prompt immediate action. Within days, investigators began piecing together the timeline of Peter and Anna's relationship. What they found was enough to warrant their arrest. The day the police arrived at their home was unremarkable until the knock on the door shattered the fragile calm. Peter opened the door to find two officers standing on the porch, their expressions unreadable but firm. Anna, who had been feeding Jack in the living room, froze as the sound of voices drifted through the house. The officers explained the charges against them, offenses related to their relationship, and before long, both Peter and Anna were escorted out of the house. As they were led to separate vehicles, Anna glanced back at Jack, who was being held by a neighbor who had stepped in to help. The image of her son's confused, tear-streaked face would haunt her in the months to come. News of their arrest spread quickly, making headlines in their local community and beyond. The story of a father and daughter who had crossed societal and legal boundaries was met with a mix of shock, outrage, and disbelief. Friends and family who had distanced themselves from Peter and Anna now found themselves at the center of a media storm, fielding questions they didn't know how to answer. The legal process moved swiftly. Within days of their arrest, Peter and Anna appeared in court, their faces etched with a mixture of defiance and resignation. The courtroom was tense, the air heavy with the weight of what was being discussed. Prosecutors presented a detailed account of their relationship, supported by evidence gathered during the investigation. The judge's ruling was clear and uncompromising: Peter and Anna were to have no contact with each other. Any attempt to communicate, directly or indirectly, would result in severe consequences. Anna was allowed to return to New York to live with her adoptive parents, who welcomed her back with open arms but also with unspoken concerns about the future. Jack, now the center of a custody battle, was placed in the care of Sarah, Peter's ex-wife. For Sarah, taking in Jack was both an act of love and a reminder of the family she had lost. She set up a nursery in her home, filling it with soft blankets and toys, determined to give Jack a stable environment despite the chaos that surrounded him. Peter, meanwhile, returned to the empty house in Nightdale. The silence was deafening. The once lively home, filled with laughter and the sounds of a baby, now felt hollow. Peter spent his days consumed by his work, his sketches growing darker and more abstract with each passing week. For Anna, life in New York was a stark contrast to the one she had left behind. Her adoptive parents did their best to support her, but the weight of the legal case and the separation from her son left her feeling isolated. She spent hours staring at photos of Jack, wondering if he would even remember her when they were finally reunited. The months that followed were marked by a series of hearings, each one chipping away at the fragile hope that Peter and Anna had once shared. As the legal battle continued, the emotional toll became increasingly evident. Peter, once a confident and charismatic artist, began to withdraw from the few friends he had left. Anna, who had always been resilient, struggled to find a sense of purpose. The community's reaction was equally divided. Some viewed Peter and Anna as victims of circumstances they couldn't control, while others saw them as a cautionary tale of what happens when boundaries are crossed. The story sparked heated debates, both online and in the media, about the nature of family, love, and the consequences of breaking societal norms. Through it all, Jack remained at the center of the storm, a symbol of both the love and the controversy that had defined his parents' relationship. Sarah, determined to protect him from the chaos, did her best to shield him from the media attention and the whispers that followed their family wherever they went. As the legal case drew closer to its conclusion, the question of what would happen next loomed large. For Peter, Anna, and everyone involved, the events of the past year had left scars that would take a lifetime to heal. The situation, once filled with hope and possibility, had spiraled into a reality that none of them could have predicted. This chapter of their story, marked by public discovery and legal action, was far from the end. It was a turning point, one that would set the stage for what was to come, a series of events that would leave a lasting impact on all who were touched by their lives. By March 2018, the fragile threads holding Anna and Peter together had frayed beyond repair. After months of legal battles, media scrutiny, and the weight of public judgment, Anna finally made a decision that had been building in her heart. She told Peter that their relationship had to end for good. Her words were firm but tinged with sadness. She needed space, she explained, to rebuild her life and rediscover herself outside the shadow of their controversial bond. For Peter, Anna's decision struck like a thunderclap. In his mind, they had faced the worst together and survived. Their love, twisted as it may have been, was something he had clung to as a lifeline. The thought of losing Anna and the life they had built, however unconventional, was unbearable. His grief quickly turned into anger, an all-consuming storm that clouded his judgment and fed his despair. As the weeks passed, Peter's emotions spiraled out of control. Alone in the quiet house in Nightdale, he spent countless hours pacing the rooms, his mind racing with thoughts he could barely contain. Sketchbooks piled up around him, filled with erratic drawings, fragments of his memories with Anna and baby Jack, distorted by the turmoil in his heart. By early April, Peter could no longer contain the maelstrom within him. On the morning of April 12th, he packed a bag, grabbed his car keys, and began the long drive to New York. The journey was filled with a haunting silence, broken only by the sound of tires against asphalt. Each mile brought him closer to a confrontation he couldn't fully comprehend. When Peter arrived at Anna's adoptive parents' home, the air was heavy with spring's damp chill. The small suburban house, with its neatly trimmed lawn and flower beads just beginning to bloom, stood in stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside him. He parked a short distance away, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he stared at the house. Inside, Anna was spending the morning with her adoptive father and baby Jack, unaware of the storm about to arrive at their doorstep. Peter approached the house, his footsteps slow but deliberate. He carried with him the weight of months of pain, rejection, and loss. What happened next would send shockwaves through the quiet neighborhood and leave scars that could never be erased. The details of that morning remain a chilling testament to the depths of Peter's despair. He entered the home, his emotions boiling over into actions that no one could have anticipated. By the time the neighbors heard the commotion and called the authorities, it was too late. Inside the house, Anna, her adoptive father, and baby Jack were gone, their lives cut short in a moment of unimaginable violence. When law enforcement arrived on the scene, they were met with a scene that even the most experienced officers found difficult to process. The quiet suburban street was quickly filled with the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, the low murmur of shocked neighbors, and the grim determination of investigators piecing together what had happened. Meanwhile, Peter had already left the scene. He drove to a nearby location, a quiet, wooded area where the trees stood tall and the air was eerily still. Here, in the solitude of nature, Peter made his final decision. Hours later, authorities found his lifeless body in the car, a tragic end to a story that had spiraled so far out of control. The news spread quickly, leaving those who knew the family in a state of shock and disbelief. Friends, neighbors, and even distant acquaintances grappled with the enormity of what had happened. How had a story that began with a search for connection and love ended in such devastation? Investigators worked tirelessly in the days and weeks that followed, piecing together the events that had led to the tragic climax. Each detail, painstakingly uncovered, painted a picture of a man consumed by his own emotions and a family caught in the crossfire of choices that had spiraled beyond anyone's control. The aftermath of that day was felt far and wide. Anna's adoptive parents' community, once a place of peace and familiarity, became a hub of grief and mourning. Candlelight vigils were held, flowers and handwritten notes left at the family's home as neighbors struggled to make sense of the senseless. For those who had known Peter and Anna, the tragedy was a sobering reminder of the complexity of human emotions and the consequences of unchecked despair. Friends who had once supported their relationship now questioned whether they could have done more to intervene. Others, who had distanced themselves, were left grappling with guilt and the unanswerable question, could this have been prevented? The story of Anna, Peter, and baby Jack serves as a haunting example of how love, when twisted by circumstance and emotion, can lead to outcomes no one could have foreseen. It is a story of loss, of choices made in moments of vulnerability, and of the devastating impact those choices can have on the lives of others. As the investigation concluded and the media coverage waned, the small community in New York began the slow process of healing. But for those who had been closest to the tragedy, the scars would remain a permanent reminder of a story that began with hope and ended in heartbreak. The story of Anna, Peter, and their ill-fated family is more than a sequence of tragic events. It's a powerful lens into the fragile nature of human relationships, the devastating impact of unresolved emotions, and the consequences of decisions that spiral out of control. As we examine the aftermath, the haunting questions linger: how could this have been prevented? What signs did we miss? And what lessons can we take from a story so deeply painful yet profoundly human? The first, and perhaps most glaring, lesson is the importance of recognizing emotional distress early. Peter's descent into despair and instability didn't happen overnight. It was the culmination of months, perhaps years, of unresolved emotions, unspoken grievances, and an inability to process rejection. His sketchbooks, once filled with life and beauty, had become a dark tapestry of inner turmoil. The shift in his demeanor, his withdrawal from friends, and his obsessive behaviors were all red flags. Yet, like so many cases before this, these signs were either ignored or dismissed as personal struggles rather than cries for help. Anna's experience highlights a different, yet equally critical, aspect: the vulnerability of those seeking connection. Her journey to find her biological parents began with hope and a desire for closure. But as her relationship with Peter deepened, the boundaries of what was healthy and appropriate blurred. This blurring of lines didn't happen in isolation. It was a slow erosion, influenced by power dynamics, emotional dependency, and a lack of external intervention. Could someone have stepped in sooner? Could conversations about the nature of their bond have altered the trajectory of their lives? The role of the legal and social systems also deserves scrutiny. When Peter and Anna were arrested and ordered to separate, the court's decision, while legally sound, left deeper emotional wounds. The separation was enforced without addressing the underlying issues: Peter's deteriorating mental health, Anna's isolation, and the unresolved tensions surrounding Jack's custody. Counseling, therapy, or even a more comprehensive support network might have provided them with tools to cope. Instead, they were left to navigate their pain alone, a silence that became fertile ground for tragedy. There's also the undeniable question of societal perception. The scrutiny they faced, amplified by media coverage, created a pressure cooker of shame and isolation. For Peter, whose identity had already been fractured by the collapse of his family, this public judgment was a final blow. For Anna, it deepened her sense of confusion and helplessness. Public opinion, while often well-intentioned, can sometimes act as a double-edged sword, offering awareness but also fueling stigma and despair. The involvement of baby Jack in this tragedy is a reminder of the collateral damage that often accompanies unresolved family conflicts. Jack, innocent and full of potential, became a symbol of hope and heartache. His short life is a painful testament to how quickly adults' choices can ripple outward, affecting the most vulnerable members of a family. As we step back from the specifics of this story, a broader question emerges: how can we, as a society, create systems that support individuals in crisis? It begins with awareness not just of the warning signs, but of the resources available to those in need. Mental health should be a priority, not a luxury. Accessible therapy, community outreach programs, and stronger social safety nets could provide the tools needed to prevent similar tragedies. Education also plays a key role. Conversations about healthy relationships, boundaries, and the impact of trauma should be normalized, starting in schools and extending into workplaces and communities. The more we understand about the complexities of human behavior, the better equipped we'll be to offer help when it's needed most. Perhaps most importantly, we must foster a culture of compassion. Judgment and blame, while instinctive, often hinder progress. Instead, empathy allows us to see beyond the surface, to understand the pain, fear, and longing that drive people to make unimaginable choices. This doesn't mean excusing behavior but rather addressing its roots to prevent it from happening again. The story of Anna and Peter is not one of villains and victims, it's a story of people, flawed and fragile, navigating the complexities of life. It's a story that could happen anywhere, to anyone, given the right or wrong circumstances. And while the ending is undeniably heartbreaking, it carries with it a message that deserves to be heard: we must do better. For our families, our friends, and ourselves. As we close this chapter, we invite you to reflect on what you've heard. What lessons stand out to you? What do you think could have been done differently? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, we'd love to hear your perspective. If you found this story thought-provoking, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories that challenge and educate. Together, we can explore these cases with empathy, learn from them, and strive for a future where tragedies like this are less likely to occur. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.